All right, everybody. So for this networking portion, I'm going to go through some content I have just about networking in today's day and age based on all the things that I have seen. I'd love for this to be, conversational. Really, when we get to the end of the presentation, like I would love to be able to open it up. You guys can ask questions in the chat and that sort of thing as well. But the first thing I'd like to do is I was scrolling through the chat comments on the last presentation before we went into this one, and there were some questions. There were some good questions in there that I'd like to provide some quick answers to. So from Lori Long, she asked, "What experiences can we provide to our students now to help them prepare to be entrepreneurs?" And I think again that goes back to the stories of how people have done it so far, which kind of leads me into that whole thing like about podcasts and like where you can get this kind of like knowledge and that sort of thing. So I think as an entrepreneur you should always have whomever your aspirational entrepreneur is, and you should be watching what they're doing, like how they're going about doing things. Mine, certainly one of the huge ones, is Sarah Blakely. Funny thing about Sarah Blakely with Spanx is she invested in Steve Case's fund. So like by proxy of that, she's actually an investor in Mixtroz, which is crazy to think about, like how that trickled down. But I am very aware of her story, very aware of her journey, and there are so many parts of her story that speak to me. So I think being able to know the journeys of entrepreneurs and sharing those with your students are inspirational, so they can see, everybody is just always seeing what people look like at their peak. Even if you're talking about a sports star like LeBron, I mean, yes, he definitely has like God-given talent in there, and he is built like a monster because who is 6'8" and has a wingspan like he does. But at the same time, there's a lot of practice that goes behind that. There is hours of shooting baskets, some of which don't make it in, but staying there to keep doing it. So I think reminding your students of the process instead of the end result is a great thing. Even just going into Sarah Blakely, if you guys aren't familiar with her story, she's a fascinating person to understand how her company became what it was. And it's this: Sarah Blakely, when she created Spanx, was a door-to-door fax machine salesperson, and I don't know that I knew that job even existed. And so the whole problem she was solving for is she had a pair of white pants and she couldn't figure out what to wear underneath these white pants to make it look smooth. So she just cut the feet off a pair of pantyhose. She did that, it worked, and she thought to herself, wow, that worked. There's not a product like this on the market that does that. And so she had to go through a lot of ups and downs to get where she was. It's interesting because she is the first female self-made billionaire. She still owns 100% of her company because she put $5,000 of her savings into her business and then was able to sustain from there. Another thing that she did, just because she's a hustler, is when she had her first meeting with Nordstrom, that was the first big brand to carry Spanx. The woman the buyer that she was speaking to at Nordstrom, when they were sitting in the meeting together, like the buyer wasn't really feeling it. Like she could tell. She was like, "Ooh," she was like, "This isn't going well." So she asked the buyer to come into the bathroom with her. She put on a pair of Spanx, like she took off whatever she was wearing, put on a pair of Spanx, and then put her outfit back on, and was like, "This is what it does." The buyer then got it, and that's how she got her first order. So it does have a lot to do with like going against convention, thinking outside of the box. I think my real life example of that is the Black Female Founder Fund Me t-shirts. It's being authentically yourself to get where you're trying to go and getting people to understand, what you're doing. So I think that that's so important. Just breaking it down for them, finding entrepreneurs that you find inspirational for the products that you're using day to day, digging into their story a little bit and figuring it out. Another one of my aspirational brands is Airbnb. So Airbnb is about to IPO. Like, who would have thought several years ago that we would all be comfortable booking a room at a stranger's house and going there and sleeping? Like, who does that? Like, when Airbnb became a thing, investors kept telling them, like, people don't do that. We have like high security tendencies. Like, people don't do that. Obviously, that was wrong. I think one of the most interesting things, well, two things that are interesting in Airbnb's journey is Airbnb, the founder, always says he was like a 1,036 day overnight success. So like he was like it took time. He was like, it wasn't just like came up with the idea and people bought on to air or launched or bought into Airbnb so quickly. And another thing that's interesting is they raised their funding in the most interesting way. So they were running out of money. They had maxed out their credit cards and they were like, man, we need to get some money in the door really quick. So they decided that they were going to do this like guerrilla marketing push around the Democratic National Convention because it was going on at the same time when they were trying to scale up. So all they did is they tried to advertise to people and say, hey, all the hotels are sold out, but if you need a place to stay, get on this Airbnb platform and you can book a place to stay that way. And to raise awareness about it, they literally set up booths outside of the Democratic National Convention that year. They bought a whole bunch of like Fruit Loops or something, like the cereal. They took the labels off the Fruit Loops box and put collateral on top of it that said Obama owes. And so people went wild over this and they like sold 40 grand worth of them so that they could get money in the door. And that's the way they did it. And so it has so much to do with thinking outside of the box and just being different, like leaning into the difference that you have to get where you're trying to go. And I swear, I find that story so fascinating. I'm like, man, that was smart. So there's that. There's a question over here to give ideas on how we can serve international first year students to the country who are passionate about finding a way and making their way. Same thing. Like, I mean, I think it's the same thing about that. Like international students, making them aware of founders who came from elsewhere, came here and sharing their stories. Like there was a big death recently in the entrepreneurial community. It was Tony Hsieh who founded Zappos. He just died this past week in a house fire. And he has an interesting story. His story is so interesting that he was someone who comes from an international background, came here, built one company, sold it, and then rolled that into Zappos. And his ethos about like the whole thing about Zappos is because it doesn't sound that I don't know, different or interesting to sell shoes online, but the way that he built his company on the inside, like the whole thing is whatever happens, you're supposed to deliver a wow to the customer. He completely changed the game and how e-commerce is done. And then after that, he went on to pour back into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I think it's so great to hear stories like that. Somebody said, Eric Matthews says, what is the best way for students to network in a virtual environment? Use Mixtroz. Like, wait, guys, I'm always hustling. Use Mixtroz. You can reach out to me about that. Which podcast do you recommend? Love this question. So I was like, let me go into let me go into the podcast directory today and throw a couple of them out. So one is the first podcast I would recommend, and I feel like this is something you could listen to as a class and then talk about it in class, is How I Built This. That is an excellent podcast. A lot of you are nodding your heads. Yes, if you have not ever listened to it, it is wonderful. It's an NPR podcast, and literally week by week, they just talk to another founder. They start at the beginning and go all the way through now, so you can really get into the nitty gritty about podcasts. Other podcasts that I think are fascinating. Let's see. Up First is great. The Daily is great. These are daily podcasts that come out that talk about certain topics. So I think both of those are awesome. There is another podcast called Planet Money. And Planet Money talks about just the way that money and economy affects the world in a way that I think is relatable even for students today. And I'll even say there's a particular episode that talks about the brand Planet Fitness, like the gym. And that particular episode made me change our pricing model at Mixtroz. Like it was so impactful, me hearing what they were saying about Planet Fitness. It literally led me to go back to the drawing board and change our pricing model on Mixtroz. And what they were telling me in that podcast is Planet Fitness, it's interesting because to have a gym membership there, it's like $10 a month or something, which is so contrary to everybody else in their space where it's like $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever it is. They do that $10 a month because it's almost too low for someone to care about canceling it. And so they end up having a gym, like they were at their gym facility that's in Midtown Manhattan. It only has space to accommodate 300 or 400 people at any given time, yet there are 10,000 members at that gym who are actively paying just at that one location. And the reason for that is it's so cheap that people are just like, well, if I ever get the hankering to go to the gym, I'll go to the gym, and it's great to have the membership. And so their pricing model is so smart for that reason. And that's a great podcast that highlighted that to me. Let me see if I have anything else on here. There's one called Spectacular Failures. Awesome podcast. Spectacular Failures talks about some of the biggest brands and why they failed. And I think it's just a good lesson in what not to do. And I think sometimes we need to hear that sort of thing just for perspective. So that's a few of the podcasts that I really like. There is also a series of podcasts called The Startup. It's by Gimlet Media. Those are also great because obviously they are very focused on startups. You can hear people pitching and all of that. The other thing that I recommend doing is when your students have to pitch something, like if you're doing something in the class where they're working on a project and they need to pitch something, they need to also watch other people pitching. Even myself, before I pitch or when I'm getting ready to get into a pitch or get into pitch mode, I will watch a slew of other entrepreneurs pitching at my same stage, and I want to take what they did that really engaged with the audience, seemed to resonate with the judges, whatever it is, and I want to watch those so I can apply it to myself. So again, a lot of this has to do with taking the time to do the research to see what's out there and then applying it to what you're doing yourself. Really like this question from D McCall. She says, how do you find your balance when it was overwhelming with life, work, and building? And I think the thing there is, one, you have to, as an entrepreneur, I think telling the students, like, it's not about being rich. Like, the goal as an entrepreneur is not about being rich. That's not what the goal should be. The goal should be about making the world better in the way that your business is going to do that. So you have to love the business. Like, if you don't love the business, there are so many times where I could have quit Mixtroz, but because Mixtroz makes sense in my journey, I love people. I love talking to people. I'm a broadcast mass comm major, and my business has to do with networking. This is something I'm very passionate about. So even when things are going wrong and it feels like it's flying off the rails, at the base level, I still love Mixtroz. And so if you don't have that base level love for the thing that you are making your life's work, I don't think that it's going to endure. So whatever you choose to do, you have to be like passionate about it on some level so that you can endure when things start to get rough. And then the way to keep that balance, because I'll tell you, specifically because I'm in a family business, like, there's literally no time that's not Mixtroz time on any given day, like any given weekday. My mom and I, thankfully, we're no longer sharing a bed, and we live at two separate residences, which was like very good, I think, for our mental health and psyche. But my mom is 25 minutes away from where I am right now. And on any given day, we probably talk to each other on FaceTime 15, 20 times. And it could be like a 2-minute FaceTime. It could be a 15, 20, an hour FaceTime. And so there is no time that's not Mixtro's time. But one thing that we do to just keep our mental health in balance is we actively seek joy. We don't just expect joy to happen. So joy for me is being able to take my boxing classes. That's like my non-negotiable thing that happens every day. Every day at 5:30, no matter what's going on, I shut it down for a minute, and then an hour later, I open it back up if need be. So I think it's carving out those moments that are just you moments. So that's, I think, really, really important. Um, s- J- uh, G, Janine, maybe, she said, uh, having having been charged with putting together virtual teacher workshops for young entrepreneurs from K to 12 to teach the design process, any advice for very young kiddos? I think just across the events landscape, virtual events, because I will say the people who are bringing you virtual event software, they're all figuring it out in real time too, because of the profound shift that we just have experienced in the market, right? So something that I keep hearing about, something I see on events blogs and stuff like that, one of the best things that you can do if you're going to have people on a virtual event for a long amount of time is to give them something that they can do together, like something that's tangible. So it's either, they go out and get the things that they need to do what they're going to be doing while they're on on the session, or it's something that gets sent to them in advance, even if it's small. Like the easiest way for me to like illustrate this is like, people have been doing networking events with Mixtroz, and like they send the people who are attending like wine and cheese, like that kind of thing in advance. Obviously, that's not going to be what it's going to be for the students, but I think you get where I'm going. There's something that really humanizes and ties the process together when people are doing the same thing, even when we're virtual. It makes us feel more connected. That's how our brain works. So I think thinking about that, what is something tangible that people can be doing together while they're also listening to the content? I think one of the biggest things that people forget is people get so worried about the content, like content, 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 content. We're living in a day and age where content can ultimately be streamed at a later time. There's something special that happens when you're able to gather people together all at the same time and they're tuned into the same thing. So I think you have to remember that the most important thing on the Zoom or whatever platform you're using isn't actually the content. The most important thing is the human asset that you've brought together and the magic that you can make happen between those humans during the time that you have them together. So keep that in mind as you're designing events. And then there's one more, I think, down here. Um, oh, so this is a good one. So it was a question about um, so it says, so I can give the kids some reality as they begin to build their ideas and dreams. Statistically, how many no-shows do you have for booked opportunities? In my experience, those are what kills the dreams. But if students hear that it is normal, it might give them hope. Well, yes, I'm here to confirm, so normal. So again, like I've highlighted some of these great opportunities that we're involved in now in Mixtroz, but the reason why I have so many great opportunities to share is because I cast a very wide net. You have no idea, and I don't even know if I can put a number to it, of how many things I actually apply for and the number of which are no's, and then the few yeses that I get among those sea of no's. And so what I find is if you spread your net wide and you're trying to dabble in a lot of different things, like based on like what you're applying for, it's like applying for college. It's like, yes, I have my schools that are like, these are like my top 3, like I would love to get into those, but I'm also casting the net wider than that, because then when you get a no, it doesn't sting as much. It doesn't debilitate you. You're able to keep pushing forward because you're like, okay, well, there still was some opportunity there, instead of it just being like so negative. I put all my eggs in one basket, and if that doesn't work out, then everything else is going to be derailed. So I think a lot of it has to do with casting a wide net and going from there, because it's almost the same thing that happens with these pitch competitions. With pitch competitions, you have a panel of judges. I once had a judge tell me that he did not like my business simply because he hated the colors orange and blue. Like, what do I do with that? Like what do I do with that? So my whole point there is I can't help that he had a bad experience with Crayola at some point, right? Like I can't help that that happened to him. But what I can help is how I presented my business that day. So it all has to do with casting a white net and also understanding that no's are going to happen. To get funded, people used to tell us, like they were like, "Oh, just so you know, like you're going to talk to, at least 100 investors. 100 of them are going to say no before you hear yes." And we were like, it's aggressive. Seriously, 100 or so no's before you get to yes. And so it's just that perseverance to keep pushing through, to know that every time you hear a no, you're one step closer to getting to your yes. And so I think that that's an important thing to instill with students. So now that we've done that, and I'm glad that I did that, because I was really going through the chat and I was like, what great questions. Let's go ahead and just talk about some things about networking generally. I think this is also applicable, obviously, for you all as professionals as we start to go back out and meet with one another. Hopefully by mid of next year. I keep hearing this phrase herd immunity, and I'm like, I guess. Okay, so here we go. So here's a couple things about networking that I have learned from being in the business of networking, I would say, for quite some time now. So one, Networking, the word itself, like this is according to Harvard, like these are the words that networking generally evokes from people. It's one of the only words in the English language that makes people feel physically dirty when they hear about it, because you feel like when you're networking, you're going to people and you're asking them for something without being able to give them something in return. And most humans just find that like unpalatable. So this is why we're trying to change the perspective of that with Mixtroz. We don't so much say the word networking, we more so say connecting, because that is a much more positive connotation. So obviously, you guys know my story a bit. True connection, like I explained to you earlier in this presentation, can obviously change your life. If you are willing to be open and have conversations with those that are around you, those that look different from you, it can literally change your life. Here's a story that I will share just about unconscious bias. I think being able to have very candid conversations with your students about unconscious biases they may have, even getting them to list them out, like getting people to recognize, like, when you go into a room, and let's talk about live networking right now, because that's what we were all doing before we all had this profound shift. What we know to be true is that when you walk into a room as a human, you are predisposed to do one of three things. The first thing that you'll probably do is you may go to an event with someone that you know already, and then you will cling to that person like a security blanket for near the duration of the event. So that's not good, because you're not going to meet anyone new. The second thing that you might do is you may go to the event alone, and you may have the best intentions to make new connections with new people and all of that. But very quickly, you will likely walk into that room, you will scan the room, and you will beeline for those that you know already, or you will inexplicably gravitate towards people who look like you. So that there is called homophily. Homophily is what we are predisposed to do. We naturally gravitate towards people who look like us. So if you've ever walked into a room and you feel like the room is segregated by race or gender, that is literally just sociology working against us. It is a natural phenomenon that you have to be actionable in thinking about so that that doesn't happen. That's why Mixtroz is great, because that mixing people based on not their outward characteristics but their internal thoughts about themselves, it works really well, because you end up with extreme diversity in groups. Because oftentimes you'll see someone make a snap judgment about them, and it's completely false, completely incorrect. The third thing that will happen at an event when you go is, if you can't quickly find someone to engage with, because we all have handy dandy smartphones in our pockets, it is a high likelihood that you will go towards the back of the room, pull out your smartphone, and disengage from the room completely. So all of that is bad, and it presents a problem. So this conversation is, how can you go into networking opportunities, those opportunities to connect with people that will be more fruitful for you, and what your ultimate goals are, this like true connectivity that we're all looking for. So the way that I've broken this up is really looking at all of the different stages of communication, like since we started communicating as humans. So it starts with signs and signals, we go to speech, then we go to writing, and then we'll go into some other things. So a couple things under signs and signals: when you're networking with someone and you want to network successfully with them, people really like to hear themselves talk sometimes. And so it's just good to go into a networking situation understanding that part of your time should be spent just listening, allowing people that space to talk about themselves without you feeling the need to interject. Instead of interjecting and then changing the subject and bringing it back to you, a real easy way to let somebody know that you're engaged with them is when they are talking to you, tilting your head. That tilt, for whatever reason, it is a sign that you are actually paying attention and engaged in what they're saying. Also, positioning for yourself for success in the venue. So I wonder if anybody can guess, and you can share this with me in the chat if you have a thought on it. Say that you're at a networking mixer after work, and say this is a situation where there's cocktails. Where is the best place for you to stand to network effectively for someone in that room? So if you can imagine the room, it has a bar, it has tables, maybe it has a stage where there's somebody playing music, that sort of thing. Where is the best place to stand in that room? I'm gonna answer my own question. But okay, so Lori says by food or bar. So she's pretty close. The best place to stand in that room is the table that's right off from the bar. The reason for that is People go to the bar to get the things they want or need. By the time they've turned around and started to walk away from the bar, now they feel like satisfied, satiated. Now they're open to have a conversation. So you want to be at that table that's like right off the bar so that you can capture the person that you're looking for when they're in their happiest mood. So like right off the corner of the bar, that's actually the best place for you to be to position yourself well. There's a reason why every time you go to a networking event of any kind, it's like bar, a little bit of space, and then there are tables sprinkled about. It's to make that happen. But now that you know that, you can actually go to those tables because that's exactly what they're there for. Another thing that I have found to be super helpful is there was a woman, it was at an event called USASB. This is like the United States like Small Business Entrepreneurship Association, that sort of thing. And the woman who was the CEO of that organization, every day of the conference she wore a hat. So like, I mean, we're indoors, but she wore a hat. Like the first day it was a red hat, second day it was a white hat. And what was amazing about that is everyone knew exactly where she was in that room if they needed to get to her to have a conversation, and she knew that's exactly what it would do. So just thinking about like dressing the part for the things that you're going to, the role that you have. If we were in person, Eileen, Robin, these YEI folks, the thing that they have done with wearing that yellow specifically on a Zoom like this, excellent, because you know exactly where to go when you need help. So again, dressing the part for the role that you have at the event that you have. Another thing that I say that people don't think about often is it actually does matter how you're feeling when you're networking. Networking can be uncomfortable, specifically if you consider yourself an ambivert or an introvert. So know that about yourself. And like for me, you will never catch me in a pair of heels at a networking event. Reason is, wait, this is probably too much information for y'all, but like I have flat feet and so it's painful. And so if I'm sitting there in heels just to look nice and I'm thinking about my feet, I'm not really thinking about having a conversation with you. I'm thinking about how soon it is until I can get these shoes off. So again, depending on what your goals are, the space that you're going to be in, dress for the part to make yourself comfortable so you can be as open and engaged as you like. It's funny, these sound like small things, but they actually do improve the experience that you have. Thus, that will make your networking better. And that really ties into being authentically you, being comfortable with who you are and what makes you comfortable, what makes you feel comfortable in the space, what makes you feel like you. There aren't rules about this. You just have to be comfortable in like showing that because it will naturally draw people to you. People appreciate authenticity. And so when you are conveying yourself as who you truly are, people will grow to appreciate that and they'll come to you. So let's go to the next part in this. And I'm like, there we go. Speech and language. So these again, they seem like common sense things, but I feel like they need to be said. So when you're speaking to somebody, it is knowing that you're going to do some listening before you get to reciprocate and say your part of the story or your part of the conversation. And you have to be mindful of not taking over the conversation. That can end up becoming very overwhelming for people if you just continue to dominate the conversation. I even have to check myself on this. I love to talk and I'm an extrovert. So literally, one thing I will never do is, unless it comes up organically, I will never mention that LeBron James nugget. Reason why is that takes over a conversation. A conversation that is about building tech infrastructure will then turn to basketball for no reason because I dropped that nugget in the conversation. There's no need to bring that up. So if you have like a fun fact about yourself that you know will just completely take over the conversation, resist the urge to drop that nugget every time that you talk to someone new. The other thing is it will make you come across extremely humble when people do find out that nugget about you by going to your LinkedIn or doing some follow up with you, because they'll be like, wow, that's huge. And she didn't like come out the gate with that. People really tend to appreciate that sort of thing. Also, do not be the person that tries to lock someone in at a networking event to a 30 to 45-minute conversation. The whole point of a networking event is collisions. These conversations should be short and sweet, enough that you have made a memory, can have a memory jog with the person so you can follow up later. The entire relationship does not have to happen at that networking event. It is just a touch point. And then also being considerate of other people's time. When you tie people into a conversation in that, you're not only stunting their growth at that event, you are stunting your own growth at that event, you're stunting their growth as well. So remember, allow people the opportunity to gracefully exit. Now, if you're having just an excellent conversation with you and it's with someone new and it's life changing, those rules can shake a little bit, but just keep in mind what the other person may be wanting and needing. Another thing that we like here is asking open-ended questions. Something that I love is I always have, if the conversation's not naturally flowing, I have a couple go-to, let's call them icebreakers, that I go to every single time. They are questions that would work for anyone. Like a good example of this, my favorite question to ask someone is, what was the first concert you attended? Like if I'm meeting somebody and there's like not a good place of commonality to start, that's a great question because most people can answer that question. Even if they've never been to a concert, that is something to talk about. It leads me to something else. Oh, so music's not your thing. What is your thing? What do you like to do? That's an open-ended question where somebody can give me a robust answer about themselves. The other reason why I like this question is because I have an interesting answer. So when people say, oh, what about you, Ashlee? What was your first concert? I hit them with Blink 182 and Sum 41. And that's never where they expect me to be. And so it shows them, again, something new and organic about myself. And so I love that. So just having a few go-to icebreakers that you hit someone with is great because then you always have something to fall back on and you don't have to do the awkward thing where you hold your drink and you're holding your like cold plate of food and you're trying to talk about nothing like the weather. Don't do that. um, Offering something of value. When I can, I try to go into conversations with the mindset of what can I do for this person that I sought out to connect with? Like, what is something valuable that I can offer them? Is it a connection to someone in my network or something like that? Is it maybe a case study that I read recently that I can share with them, a way for us to continue the conversation? So understanding that you have value, you're at that event, you're at the networking function, the work event, whatever it is, you have value, you have knowledge that this person may not have access to. How can you share that in a way that's easy and enhances what they're trying to do? So thinking about that. And then this is one of my favorites, and this really has to do with when you're at a live event. I see this behavior super often. If there's a keynote speaker, or let's say it's like an esteemed guest or whomever it is, people naturally try to beeline for the speaker. And I mean, beeline for the speaker. And what ends up happening is the speaker has this like snake line of people waiting to say something to them. And I can tell you now, as a speaker, what's going through my mind usually when I'm coming off of a stage is, and I hate to be crass, but what's going through my mind is, I have to pee. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. Like, I need to make it to the bathroom because I was just on stage. I just had a lot of water because I needed my voice to be clear when I was speaking to y'all. So like, I'm thinking about this line of people. I'm trying to be nice and gracious and hear what everybody has to say. But ultimately, it's going in one ear and out the other because I really have to use the bathroom. So resist the urge to go to whoever you think the hot person in the room is, because likely they're not even going to be able to remember it because they just got bombarded with all this information from all those people that are in line. Instead, and this is something I'll talk about in a minute, the idea of networking across instead of up, I think applies so well here. So if it were me and Barack Obama was giving a speech, I would never try to go have a conversation with Barack. Now, if he was taking photos, I might want to go do that. But I would never just try to have a conversation with Barack in an open forum like that. Instead, I would be trying to figure out where his chief of staff is or where somebody who works for him is. Reason being, that person's going to be easier for me to get to. Guarantee you that person does not have a line, and guarantee you that person can ultimately get my meeting with Barack if that's what my ultimate goal was. So just think about that. Who is the person that the person you want to be connected to came with, is connected to already? Go for that person, and they can actually make your connection happen in a more meaningful way. There's that. So now let's talk about the follow-up part of this. So this gets us to writing as far as communication is concerned. Follow up is everything. It's everything. Like, you can have conversations with so many people, but if there's no follow up to it, and if your follow up is only, like swapping business cards, that's not good. 80% or 88% actually of business cards go in the trash. So if you are just going to events, just arbitrarily swapping business cards with people, that's not good. You want to actually have real conversations with people do enough in that conversation to essentially make a memory, and then you want your follow up to be on point. One way of doing that is oftentimes I will prep myself before I go to like a big networking event or a conference. I will have like an email template that I will use over and over and over as I'm following up with the people that I shared contact details with. And then at the bottom of it, I will have like customizable areas. Sometimes I literally call it a memory jog, and I'll say something like, we were both Cleveland Cavs fans, or our parents both went to Kent State, or whatever it was that tied that conversation together that kind of sticks out. Because when that person gets that email, and they're probably getting a slew of emails from all different types of people, they can remember exactly who I am and exactly what we talked about. So thinking about that follow up, like methodically, like that, is so very helpful. The other thing that I'll tell you is, I recently had to go through this experience. The follow up is not fun. It's not supposed to be, but movement in your business, movement in your professional life, movement comes in the mundane. And what I mean by that is, I recently presented at a conference called Venture Atlanta. There were hundreds, literally hundreds of investors on this Venture Atlanta virtual conference. As a presenter at that conference, I got access to the list of investors, but no contact information. All I had was a name, the fund the investor represented, and that was it. The rest of it was up to me. So there are so many founders who said, oh, I can't do the work of like going through that list and going through these people, and it's going to take too long. And I'll tell you, it took me maybe 2 weeks to get through that entire list. And like the final part of the list, I just had to hunker down on a Sunday for like 5 hours and go through the process of Googling the name, finding them on LinkedIn, finding the fund, going on the fund website, scrolling the fund website to see if they invested in anything that was close to Mixtroz, if they invested in my stage, whatever the case was. And if the answer was a yes, going back to LinkedIn, writing the person a little LinkedIn message, and then trying to make that connection, which would ultimately lead me to trying to get a meeting. And when I tell you, my work, even though it was arduous and it took weeks, it's paying off in spades. I literally have a few of those cold emails who may come into our current funding round for like $100,000 or more. So again, movement happens in the mundane. It's not fun, it's not glamorous, but the work has to be done. So again, view this networking stuff as tactical. Like, know that you're going to have to do the follow up after those initial connections are made, or else they're going to go absolutely nowhere. The other thing that I will say is, and I think this is this is a good nugget to pass on to your students. When you're networking, get comfortable in the space of asking for anything while the networking is happening. Like, asking for anything, ask like the thing that you want to happen. You need to be comfortable enough with what that thing is to go ahead and make the ask, because again, the worst someone can say to you is no. If your student, like if you have a student in Cleveland City schools and there is a business person that they are like, ooh, it would be really great to see if that person could be a mentor to me, or if that person could have a conversation with me so I could learn a little bit from them, send the email, reach out to them, find that person's assistant, because oftentimes the answer will be yes, because people get so worked up in making asks like that, and they're like, oh, I'll be bothersome to them or whatever. Trust and believe, there aren't a lot of people who are going to take that extra step, and so it can be so appreciated by that desirable person that you're trying to get to. A perfect example of this for me is, I gave a keynote at Babson College recently, and so many of the students took the time to send me a LinkedIn message. So many of the students took the time to say, hey, if you have 15 minutes, I would love to get on the phone with you to talk about this thing. When people do that to me all day, I will figure out the time to make that happen, even if it's on a night and weekend. There was one girl in particular, she was located in the UK. She got on the phone with me for 15 minutes. We were on WhatsApp or whatever, and now she has my contact information. And I literally told her after we get off the call, text me whenever you like. I might not text you back instantaneously, but I will get back to you. So that kind of thing is appreciated. When you see that hustle in someone, I think as an entrepreneur, a business leader, whatever, you appreciate that hustle in someone. And so tell your students, be comfortable, get comfortable in asking for whatever they want, because the only thing that can happen is it's a no, and then they keep moving on. Let me go back over here. I think that there is a nice balance between being persistent and being annoying. my belief in this is I have like a 3 strike rule. If I reach out to somebody 3 times and they don't respond back to me, that's when I'll move on. That's just a personal thing with me. I think everybody needs to gauge that with themselves. Even reaching out to someone 3 times, that's something that I had to get comfortable with because I don't like to be a pest. I don't like to feel like I'm bugging anyone. But again, to get where you're going, those extra steps are necessary. You never know. Did the email go to spam? Were they really busy that day? Did they have a family emergency that day? I don't know, but I'm going to keep asking until I get to my point of it's time to move on, because you never know what's happening. Another example that I'll give you, this is a nugget from my mom. When you meet somebody, if you're meeting somebody that is a desirable person to you, like you're seeking knowledge or a connection or something else from them. My mom and I were at a conference and Dan Gilbert was there, who owns what Quicken Loans, the Cavs, all that stuff. And so Dan Gilbert is at the conference. Obviously, Dan Gilbert's like a billionaire with a B. Like he's like, it's like, oh man, Dan Gilbert's here. That's wonderful. When he exited the stage, my mom broke my rule and she went after the speaker. She went after the speaker. But I will say the tactic that she used made it okay to break the rule. The first thing my mom did is, one, I saw her jump over a chair to get to him before anybody else got to him. But two, when the first thing she said to him was not like, wow, Dan Gilbert, let me tell you about Mixtroz. What she said to him is, Dan, she said, I used to work at Ford Motor Company. And when I would get in, like when the team would get in trouble, we'd have to come up to Dearborn. And I always used to stop at Trapper's Alley in Detroit to get my hair done. And then Dan looked at her and said, Trapper's Alley? You know what Trapper's Alley is? She found a way to connect herself to the billionaire. My mom and the billionaire became friends. She literally has Dan Gilbert's phone number now, and sometimes they text. It's very simple, y'all. Like, find a way to humanize people. Do your recon. Find a way to humanize people. That one was really easy. We were well aware, being from Cleveland, Ohio, who Dan Gilbert is, very well aware of how passionate he is about Detroit and Cleveland. My mom found the great equalizer, which is, here is something to humanize us both, and it worked. So keep that in mind. All right. We've already talked about this business card thing. Guys, I think one of the worst things that you can do is go into an event, specifically a live event, with a stack of business cards with the goal of giving all those things away. It has no value. It's like it's like giving away currency that has zero value. Again, 88% of business cards end up in the trash. I think the better approach is have 5 business cards in your pocket, have 10 business cards in your pocket, and only give those to the people who you actually want to continue a relationship with. Not everybody needs a business card. Some people, it just is nice to meet you. Hey, it's nice to meet you. Have a good day. That's it. You don't have to give them a business card. Give your business card to the people who you actually want to continue with. That makes it more valuable, not just to you, but to the other person as well. I'll never forget, this woman sticks out in my mind. I was speaking to a group of people, and she was right here on the outside of the group of people. She wasn't saying anything, but she was standing here like this. And so we all kind of turned around to see what she was doing, or, if she wanted to join the conversation or what she needed. She literally said no words, and she passed out her business card to us like she was passing out like cards from a deck, and then she moved on. That was it. We had no idea what she did, what her business was, what have you. And so again, resist the urge to litter everyone with business cards, because they have no value, and ultimately you're killing trees and wasting money and all that good stuff. Positioning name tags with care. Guys, women mostly, don't position your name tag in an awkward position. You're going to get the name tag. Be aware of where it is. Hopefully you get a name badge that can like hang around your neck. So that's just a little one with that. The other thing I'll say is, I'm not a computer. I'm not a machine. Methodical follow-up, it takes some reminders and such. So like, I use the tools that I have at my disposal. All through my calendar, there are areas where it's like, follow up with this person. Follow up with this person. Here's this person's cell phone number. Today's the day you should follow up with this person. Oftentimes I'll reach out to somebody and they'll say, I don't have time to speak right now, but hit me up in 6 months or something. I think they're always assuming that that's not actually going to happen, but like 6 months to the day, here I come again with another email. And it's not because I'm a computer, it's because I go through the process of like setting myself up for success. So I get that memory jog when I need it. Something like that literally happened yesterday. In August of this year, we were having a conversation with Salesforce about an event that they might want to do in 2021. The person kind of went quiet. And so literally yesterday, I was like, happy holidays. Would love to get back in touch with you as we're starting the planning for 2021 before the holidays. And again, I can tell you that person was not expecting that email from me, but here's the memory jog. Maybe he has more time now. And if he doesn't have more time now, I set my calendar appointment to remind me 4 weeks from now. And so that'll be my third strike. If I don't hear from him then, I'll move on. But there is a methodical process to going about this follow-up to get to that yes, the answer that you're looking for. Another thing that we talked about is, or that we briefly touched on, is the ability to network across. Never discount the people who are around the people that you need. Everybody wants to network up. Like, I need to network up. I need to network up. Never discount the knowledge that you can get from somebody who is at a same or similar level than you, because they're likely have experienced things a little bit different from you, and you can gain knowledge from them. So it's resist the urge to always go after the Beyonce, if you will, in the room. Not necessary. You can go for her stage manager, a backup dancer, whatever, and get the same information that you need, likely more quickly and more succinct. I like this one. Accept where you are and what you can do today. You know, sometimes people get discouraged going into events because they're like, oh, these people have done all these amazing things. We've all done different levels of extraordinary. That's fine. Lean into what yours are and accept them. Again, when we first started this business with Mixtroz, knew nothing about technology, yet we had to figure out a way to fit in that room. And yes, was it uncomfortable because I wasn't always completely savvy of what was going on in the conversation? Sure. But what I did was I used my listening skills in those particular conversations. I gained knowledge until I was the person who was able to disseminate knowledge to others. That has to do with entrepreneurship too. When we were first getting into the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I didn't know that I had much to add, but really I did, because there were things that came from my professional career that translate very well to being an entrepreneur. So I had it then, but I recognized that that was my time to take in knowledge, not give knowledge, and understanding that there are like seasons for everything. There are seasons to learn, there are seasons to give knowledge to people, all of that. So don't be discouraged by where you are. Growth is something that will naturally happen as you continue to do these things. Another thing, we talked about this earlier, it's the homophily thing. Actively not going to events with people that you know. And this is difficult for my mom and I. So something that we do very intentionally is when we go to an event together, at the very beginning of it, we split up from one another. We literally split up from one another, because if not, we become one another's crutch. We start talking about like familiar matters. And because of that, we're not open to be able to connect with anyone else. Keep in mind that like if you go to a work event with your colleagues, remember, you see your colleagues live or virtually every single day. You're talking to them every day on email, etc. Those are the last people that you need to be navigating yourself through an event with. Like, you guys can catch up about it later. It is much better to break apart from that, either be on your own or find someone new to take that journey with through the event. Another thing is, specifically, again, when we get back to meeting in person, your natural propensity will be like, if you're at an event and there's like a seated, let's say, lunch or dinner, who are you going to sit next to? Your colleague, your spouse, your friend, somebody you know already. Having a meal and getting to know someone new is a natural thing. Think about the way that we date over here. Like, you know, what do people say? First date, dinner and a movie. There's a reason for that. It's because you're having a meal, which is something we all do, and you're able to have a conversation as that meal's going on. The worst thing that you can do is, when you're in those situations, sit with your team. Why would you do that? You see them every day. You can have lunch with them every day. That is an excellent opportunity to get to know a new group of people. Yes, may it be uncomfortable? Sure. Will it not always be fruitful? Sure. But giving yourself the opportunity to do that, again, let's open that LeBron serendipity so that you can have that happen for you. I like this one on the checking of the bias. Let me give you an example of this. So over the course of the summer with Mixtroz, we don't host our own events at Mixtroz, but this was an exception to the rule. We were thinking about our software in the sense of, what can we do that's positive with our software right now? in the time that we're living in, 2 pandemics, we have a software that talks about connectivity, community, all of that. And so what we came up with is we're going to host these things called imperfect conversations. We're going to send an email to our entire email list. The idea will be you get into a mix, you get matched up with people who are different from you. So like one of the questions we asked in that mix is, what ethnicity do you identify with? We made groups diverse on that criteria, similar on other criteria. So I myself participated in this mix. I am one of the founders of Mixtroz. I literally look at unconscious bias all day long. I ended up in a group with 3 white males. One of the white males, I looked at him and I made a snap judgment about him. The snap judgment I made is that we weren't going to vote for the same person in the election. That was a horrible thing to make a snap judgment about. Why? I just looked at him and I literally thought that to myself. And I was just like, well, Ashlee, keep this conversation going. What was so interesting to me is that this gentleman, he's like in Mixtroz, he's talking. He shifted his camera a little bit. And the person sitting next to him was his girlfriend. And she happened to be African American. And I was like, huh. I was like, well, how interesting is that? Since then, his girlfriend and I have connected. We like went off on our own and hung out. They recently got married. Best believe I was on their Facebook like, and it just made me think, Ashlee, how many people have you made a snap judgment about and you didn't have the conversation with them? And so it is really checking your biases and understanding what they are, because we all have them and it's okay, but it's being intentional about seeking out different from you. It's really taking that step to be intentional about it, not going towards people not going towards the people that look like you naturally, all of that kind of thing. I think for students of color, this can be very scary because school for them is one of the places outside of their community that they're getting exposed to other ethnic groups. And I think it can be scary and intimidating as a Black student to be put in a group of all white students. Again, because of the way that I was raised, that is not a concern that I have at all. And I actually use it to my advantage, but that comes from a lifetime of prep work. So I think the sooner that you can get students coming together with students who don't look like them, the better off they'll be. Because frankly, when I was raising money the first go round, the only people who could write the checks I needed were old white males. And so if I was scared to talk to them, I would have raised no money. And so I think like this starts with the networking of the students now. Lastly, knowing your targets, knowing stuff about the people that you want to connect with. Again, if you're going to a professional conference and there is a peer of yours that you want to connect with, take the time to go on their LinkedIn, to Google them maybe, and figure out what you can figure out about them. Like I do this all the time. Like for example, I have to give demos to my customers. Before I demo any customer of mine, I take the time to go on their LinkedIn, understand what their work history was, where they went to school, and see what they're about. Because if I can relate to them, like if I can get on the line and break the ice by saying, go Buckeyes or whatever, that is a really great way to start the conversation. If I can see on there that like we happen to be sorority sisters, woo, that is a great way to start the conversation. So taking the time to go and find out about people so that you can offer that up and you can like completely break the ice and ease the conversation is amazing. I say really good networking is this scenario here. Imagine that you are in a parking garage in the middle of the night. Let's say, you're somewhere, you're in a parking garage in the middle of the night. The elevator doors open up and let's say there is like a big burly person on there and they like have like lots of tattoos and they're looking kind of intimidating to you. So you get on that elevator, you turn around, you push the button and you're like, oh my gosh, please let nothing happen right now. What if I made this adjustment though? And think about me, who I am, what my background is. If that same scenario happened and the elevator doors opened up and it was the same person, but they had on a Cleveland Cavaliers hat, that is about to be my friend. We're about to connect. I'm about to say to him, oh, you're from Cleveland. I'm from Cleveland. Oh my gosh. So literally all it takes is that little adjustment to make connectivity happen. And that like checks the bias in so many things. Just knowing a little bit about someone can totally change the conversation. The other thing that I'll say is be aware of the world. We talked about this with like the podcasts and things. Before you go to a networking event of any kind, even if you're not a regular like news reader or podcast listener or whatever the case is, be aware of the world around you, specifically in relation to what the goals of that event are. Like, I read the news every morning. I subscribe to like CNN's top 5 because I want to know what are those 5 things, because it is a pet peeve of mine to enter into a conversation with people and have no idea what they're talking about. I want to know, but you actually have to go out and take the time to seek that knowledge so that you can add a meaningful layer to the conversation that's going on. So these are literally tips, tricks that I use when I go out to make new connections with people in this space of networking, whether we're live or whether we are virtual. So, with that, that is my formal presentation part. I did see things like flying around in the questions. And so I would love to answer any questions that you have. Ladies at YEI, you'll have to let me know if you want to interject anywhere before we go into any sort of questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashlee. That networking info session was so helpful. I know for me personally, and it's going to be so helpful for so many of the students that we all work with. I think we have a couple minutes for a few questions if anyone has anything specific that they'd like to ask Ashlee before she signs off with us.
Anyway, hold on. I see things popping up. No,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Wait, check your bias. Yes, okay. Wait, y'all. First of all, y'all are so nice. So thank you. No, I feel like they might have found it very straightforward. Again, I'm gonna drop my information into the chat again, so you guys have it. And guess what? This is the example that I'm giving you. Like, when somebody gives you their email and doesn't make it hard to find them, do feel free to reach out. It's all right.
Great. Yeah, those tips were so helpful. And I know for me, at least in my prior life, I was what my husband called a professional networker. And so listening to that and thinking, oh, all those things I was doing was the right thing, or I completely was making that mistake. And I apologize if I'm saying it incorrectly, the homophily. I think that that is like a total game changer. And for any of you who've been with us before, our dear friend Chick Thompson from Waggy Labs, when he's doing creative thinking, he flips whatever idea he has, like to the complete opposite side. And that's where he targets his energy and focus. And that's what made me think of with the homophily that, gosh, like
Mm-hmm.
flipping my idea and going to the other side of the room and finding someone that I would, completely think would not have any interest in what I have to say. And I might not be interested in them, but that's my big takeaway from this session just now. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I was going to say it has been quite a pleasure with you all this morning, and I'm so glad that I was able to come by like in this way. I think it's been great, and again, I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, because I like, people are talking about it more, which is great, but I was like, actionable things needs to be happening with y'all, because I'm telling you, I talk to my best friend who's a teacher about this all the time. I tell her, I'm like, you're out here doing the Lord's work with these fourth graders. So like, I understand. So thank you guys so much for the work that you're doing. It is appreciated. And it was such a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you, Ashlee. And I think that, the sentiments are very mutual. We are so grateful for your time this morning and you sharing us about your story and your journey. And we can't wait to follow you and see where you go and
Oh,
Mixtroz and where everything takes you.
oh,
So
thank you. Bye, everybody.
thanks. Thank you.